Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
You are listening to Aggressive Negotiations, the Star Wars podcast that travels from the heart of 1313 to the heart of the Jedi and everywhere in between. I am Jedi Master John Mills, your humble host for this adventure. And with me on this fine journey, packed in our very spacious Corellian Corvette, with a full staff of chef droids and a full library of the hottest movies out of Coruscant, is my dear friend, Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, what is on the menu for you tonight?
I'm sorry, you just interrupted me watching The Seven Jedi, and it was so good. You know, I just really appreciate that film. Master Kurosawa was excellent in his formation of like character and just shot composition. So
yeah, you know what? That is an extremely influential film. Master Kurosawa influenced Jedi for decades afterward in many more ways than we can even count. And something that influences us in many more ways than we can count is your correspondence. So reach out to us at the Jedi Masters on Twitter. Go to thenerdparty.com/contact. Drop us a line there. We get your emails. We try our best. We really do. We try our best to respond. Twitter, actually, social media is better just because it's just faster. It's easier to notice. Email is an extra step. So, you know, sometimes we're just a little more plugged in online. And of course, you can reach out to us through the network at Join Nerd Party on Twitter and the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. And I don't think we're on any other social networks. So I don't know. Maybe we need to join some. I don't know. I'm too lazy to do it. And I'm trapped here in this Corellian Corvette anyway. So what am I going to do? And as we love to do, every so often, we like to surprise each other with different topics. And so it has fallen to me because I was watching, admittedly, now this may be scandalous to consider. I was watching part of a Star Wars movie recently, if you can believe it.
what?
I know. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. I'm going off the rails, unpredictable. And I had episode 3 on, which, you know, wow, another surprise for me.
You don't even like that one.
I know.
That's
It's just
so weird.
Wow. It's not like I've gone on and on about how it's the best one. It's really weird. It's unpredictable. But something that I'm still grappling with here, and I think we've hit on it here and there, but it's something where I was watching it with my youngest, and I'm really trying to noodle through. The opening of that movie, a lot of everything for Palpatine is riding on surviving that first adventure. There's a lot that can go wrong, too. The ship can crash and kill all 3 of them. And so something that I come to and that I'm trying to figure out, and I got to throw the question to you, and I think this could delve into a couple other thoughts that I had, but I wanted to throw this out there to you. What happens if Palpatine dies at the beginning of episode 3? And the thing is, we have one scenario where he could have died with Anakin. And by that point, Dooku is dead and Grievous is leading the Separatists. What happens if Palpatine's gone? What happens if he dies?
That's a really interesting question. So is your thought process in this that, you know, that ship ends up getting hit, like it gets run into? I mean, because it got the feeling like, at least from watching the movie, you know, they know that this is General Grievous' ship and that's where he's being held. And like, it seems almost as if people have stayed away from that part of the battle. So I guess we're assuming then that somebody didn't get the message and destroyed that ship in the end.
Even if you want to go all the way to have the movie go the way that it does until the crash landing on Coruscant. You know, Anakin can land the thing, but he can't control, like, what if something goes wrong? What if the ship explodes when it lands? What if the fires rage out of control? What, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these different things that can go wrong.
True, yeah.
What happens? He's dead.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I guess it's one of those things that there's inherent risk in any situation, and you would think that Palpatine would be one who is very used to taking some segment of risk. Obviously, he's weighed all the calculations on, what can happen and how things can go. But, you're going to have to put yourself out there in a sense. And of course, he also puts himself out there in the movie as well, just because he believes that Anakin is going to come to his side, that he can lure him over, right? What if Anakin didn't? There's all different ways that Palpatine could have miscalculated finally, because it does seem like he's been on a serious batting streak. With he's batting 1,000, right? There's no better batting average than what Palpatine has had up until Return of the Jedi, right? And that was his miscalculation there. And I guess even the end of Episode 3 is his miscalculation, because he believes that Anakin is going to be able to beat Obi-Wan Kenobi, right?
Yeah.
But he's not. Obi-Wan bests him. So, it is fascinating because this is the turning point for everything. It's the turning point for the galaxy, but it's also the turning point for Palpatine's plans actually not coming to fruition in the way in which they had so far throughout most of his life. And so, if he had died, if somehow Dooku is still alive and or Grievous, if it's just Grievous, I don't think the war lasts very long. And even if it's just Dooku, honestly, I don't know if it lasts that long, just because he doesn't have the support on the other side, right? Like, they've been wagging the dog the entire time together, but when you lost your partner on the other side of the aisle, then you're really in a conundrum. So, then how the galaxy goes is a really interesting conversation, I think.
Yeah, I mentally, I just go with that crash landing ends his life, and therefore Anakin's too. So Anakin's taken out of the equation. So Anakin, in a sense, at that moment, actually fulfills the destiny. If that ship crashes, then the Sith are wiped out. The war definitely collapses. The war effort collapses because even the Separatists don't like Grievous, right? And they're forced to come back to the table. So you're left with a galaxy where there are a great number of senators who are in league with Darth Sidious at this point. Dooku says as much. By either corruption or bribery or blackmail or however, Sidious controls the Senate, at least half of it. And I'm trying to figure out, where can the Jedi possibly go? Because they're already prepared to take over the Senate. And Yoda warning, this takes us to a dark place. This is not a good thing for us to do. So given the idea that the dark side has been ascendant and has blurred the Jedi's vision for the last decade, because they admit in Attack of the Clones that they're having trouble seeing the future because the dark side is obfuscating it. Like, do the Jedi split? Is it impossible for the Jedi to survive this philosophically? And do they wind up, because I see a situation wherein you have the Jedi disagreeing with each other about what the next step is. And that leading to a whole problem of maybe not the Sith in specific, but a problem of dark Jedi arising, because the dark side is ascendant. It's easy to tap into. It's making itself available. And then the Jedi, we know that some of them want to go take things over and make, just like Anakin says, make things the way we know they need to be.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating way to take it because, as you were talking, I had been immediately in my mind just thinking something completely different. And so I'll go down your path first and say, I think that would be a really fascinating story to see kind of a split. And gosh, if Lucas is using, illustration of from history, you've got the great split between the church, right? You have the East and West. You have Rome and Constantinople creating two very different churches in the end. It's similar in some respects, but still different. So it could almost be because, in the Legacy comics that they did years ago, where it's 100 years later, you had the Imperial Knights And so that was really interesting, and so they had a segment of like Jedi-ness to them, and yet they were specifically knights for the new empire. So, and it's been a long time since I've read that, so I could have some of the details wrong, but... So, would you have like Jedi Knights then who were specifically like Republic Knights, right? They specifically went that far. They went the next step, which is, we've always talked about how the Jedi were too close to the Senate and the Republic in the first place. They just go the next logical step, which is we just become Republic Knights. And then you have maybe Jedi like maybe Yoda who say, no, this is actually the exact opposite of the step we should take, which is this is where I was thinking is that with the birth of Luke and Leia, they would still be born.
Yes.
And so that they would become the kind of savior type figures for where the Jedi should go, which is showing them a new way. That the unexpected felicity of them being born would create a new Jedi Order to which would be less dogmatic and more in tune with the Force, because, somebody like Yoda realizes that, look, we were wrong. And it is our dogmatism that really got us into the problem in the first place. And it was that left us open to not really feeling the pull of the living force, right? The cosmic force together. And so you could actually, in some ways, I feel like both of those could actually happen. And that's kind of what creates the second act of another trilogy, or the second part to this next trilogy is that happening, which again I think is a really fascinating idea. So that it's really a battle for the soul of the Force then, and I think to me that's really, really interesting.
Well, I could see very easily this going down the road of the Jedi becoming the backbone of this new empire, where the Jedi say, look, you can't govern yourselves, so we're going to become your governors, right? So instead of Tarkin being in control, you have Jedi heading up sectors. Well, yeah, I mean, no, Mace is going to stay on Coruscant and call the shots, I'm sure.
Moff Windu.
Yeah, Moff Windu. I like that. And that's a problem, I guess. But yes, essentially, yes, right? If the Jedi step in and they take over, they will inevitably be corrupted by the power. They will inevitably wind up putting in the system of governance that they're trying to avoid. I think it's inescapable. I like your idea of casting them as, like a church splitting, because that's essentially where the Sith come from. Is there's a disagreement.
Yeah.
There's a disagreement. No, our power guarantees this in the way we should be, and the people who were being the Jedi saying, no, that's not the way it goes. So after that split, the Sith rise. And if there needs to be this semblance of balance, then this split has to happen. And even if you invert it and you say, well, the Jedi that want to take control, they get banished and they get sent out, they're still out there in the galaxy. And they might not be Jedi, but they've been trained in the Force and using it. So the worst, it really is the worst of all possible scenarios for Palpatine to be removed, because the Jedi, I think, are inevitably going to split against each other. And then you're going to be left with something even messier on a galactic scale, specifically because the Jedi that want to take over, you can't send them, it's like Michael Corleone. You have to keep your enemies closer than your friends. You have to keep them close, keep an eye on them. But then if you do that, then the galaxy can spin into chaos. And there's it's almost as if Palpatine's very existence is more like Bane from The Dark Knight Rises when he says, I'm necessary evil. Gotham is corrupt. Gotham is terrible. Gotham is a bad place to be. That's why Batman has to exist, is because Gotham is all of these things. And Bane comes in and sees himself as, I'm a cleansing fire. I'm going to burn you down to the ground and bring you back up. So in a sense,
We give it back to you.
The people. But no, but seriously, like in a sense, then you can see Palpatine as that forest fire that comes in and clears out the old growth. Mm-hmm. And then that's what permits the new growth. That fire has to happen one way or the other. Right? Or
the fire rises.
Yeah, but is there do you agree with that outlook? Because it seems, even for me, a little bit cynical to think that the only way forward for the galaxy from that point is for there to be conflict and pain. Do you see a peaceful progression from Palpatine dying at the beginning of episode 3? Do you think it's possible that I'm wrong?
No, so because I really like this idea, but I was thinking of it in terms of like, legitimately if this had been the story. And I like the idea that that they become the Republic Knights, and the Republic becomes like an empire, but it's still in name only, basically Republic. And I think that it really helps then, because then you can almost have still that rebellion, right, with the Jedi, like Obi-Wan inside. I put Obi-Wan Kenobi in there, leaving it, and it's a much smaller force, right? And in some ways, they're fighting kind of a battle of attrition until Luke and Leia are going to be the ones who are going to be the ones to basically kind of like lead the rebellion charge in the end. And then but I think this creates just such a fascinating, like, I would just kind of love to see an Elseworld story, like comic almost, of this, because it's such a fascinating idea, and you can really dive into a lot of that mystical elements of the Force, which the Clone Wars had given us, and really get into that much deeper.
But see, here's the curveball I throw at you. Because because we're very much looking at the text of the film and progressing from there. But we now have a second part of the film that was given to us within the last year. Mm-hmm. Order 66 doesn't happen. But Maul is still out there. Ahsoka is still out there. Maul's been captured. Mm-hmm. The war's going to end, and we see Maul is captured. There's still the criminal underground out there, all of those sorts of things. But does the dark side become ascendant in Maul? Does Maul take the mantle? Since we know he's alive. He's imprisoned, but without Order 66, there's no reason for Ahsoka to let him out. So what role do you see Ahsoka and Maul playing in this scenario where Palpatine has died?
I think, because that's such a good question. I think what ends up happening is Ahsoka ends up being the character who's a lot like the Qui-Gon, and helps kind of like, because, and Yoda was already on this journey, right? But she becomes the one who helps continue that journey, and they lean more into that whole idea of basically like, kind of what we see her become, like Ahsoka the White. And that we're getting back to the pure essence of what it means to be a Jedi and a Force user and all of those things. So I think that becomes that. I think the beauty with Maul is that he would still be an outsider, and he would continue to do what he did with the underground, but there's no check for him, right? There's no Palpatine anymore. And so he becomes even stronger. And so then what's great about this is you end up with 3 different factions, all vying for control. And I think that would be really fascinating. And just throwing it out there, but you could also do something completely insane to which Maul finally finds maybe some redemption in the end. Like, he ends up making a turn, which would be real. And you could take, from the Clone Wars, you could take the last time that we had seen Maul being, somebody who's kind of reeling from his brother's death, and maybe, I don't know. What I'm saying is like, you could open a ton of doors here that just, you could do something really crazy.
I agree that you can do something really crazy. I think this Maul idea of a redemptive Maul arc is interesting, but I really believe Maul is so much like Palpatine, where it's even if you give him the chance at forgiveness and redemption, he's not going to accept it. I think Maul is incapable of it. But
completely possible, I think.
But with this idea of the factions vying with each other, what I think is interesting is the Jedi wind up justifying their takeover of everything because of the corruption, because somebody like Maul has this vast criminal empire. Well, you need us. You need the strong hand of a more forceful Jedi, no pun intended, to go out there and crush these criminal syndicates. And that in and of itself becomes the very impetus for the bad kind of empire, right? Like that sort of thing. We will offer you peace and security and stability in exchange for this power that you're going to grant us. Ahsoka, I think things transfer because it depends, right? If Palpatine dies, but Anakin survives and Ahsoka's still out there, is that our path to reconciliation and redeeming of the Jedi? Because the two of them can move things forward and become sort of what they always should have been, right? In that triumvirate on Mortis, but on a physical plane. And if you take Anakin out of the equation, everybody dies in the crash. Then I think Yoda reaches out to Ahsoka to bring her back and say, obviously, you're our example. And I think that would be the type of thing that would send somebody like Mace Windu off the deep end, where he would say, she's just a citizen. She doesn't have any role in Jedi business. And that can wind up triggering do you think that bringing Ahsoka back into the mix would be maybe one of the things that triggers that schism we're talking about?
See, I think so if Palpatine does die, let's just say Anakin and Obi-Wan survive. I think the movie still ends in much the same way, in the sense that you have to have this fight between brothers, and Obi-Wan coming to saying, look, the Republic has completely lost its way. It's everything what Padme says. It's everything that we were fighting against. It's become, and you have that thing where you really play up that whole idea. So to me, that's what I think would be fascinating. And at the same time, I think you can utilize maybe the Ahsoka story in the sense that, that's one of the things to which Mace Windu is more authoritarian, and part of that is not for a bad reason. He's doing it for a good reason, right? Because he knows what could happen. But again, it creates that beauty of, I'm going to do the thing to which I'm supposed to hate to try and save the thing, and that whole cycle. And again, I think what's beautiful about that is how timeless that is. That message resonates then, it resonates now, and it resonates all throughout history because, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Well,
and so
that's Anakin's own story.
This makes that even more applicable in that sense, right? Like, we're really showing how you have the best of intentions and yet you destroy everything with those good intentions. So I love it. I think that creates a really interesting thing. And then you still end up with a wonderful fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin, and it's still emotionally charged. And in fact, maybe it's even more personal because, what Obi-Wan is saying sounds a lot like what Padme was saying, right? On the patio, where she's like, what if we've become the very thing which we were fighting against? So Obi-Wan saying that just fuels that fire of, you were with Padme, and you could build all that back in, that real sexual tension of like Anakin thinking something's been going on with them, even though nothing's been going on with them.
See, the thing is, you immediately slot Anakin in as the bad guy again. And I wonder if without Palpatine stoking his fears, I almost wonder if there's a situation wherein this goes down, Ahsoka comes back, and then Anakin winds up leaving because Ahsoka shows him it can be done. And he suddenly snaps to his senses and he says, okay, Padme and I are going to go off and we're going to live our lives. Mm-hmm. Peace. I'm out. And then you can set him up as personally training his children. Maybe with Uncle Obi-Wan showing up every so often while this is going on in the galaxy. And so you sort of turn it on its head where Luke and Leia, instead of growing up with adoptive parents, grow up with their natural parents out in the quote unquote middle of nowhere, you know, off on the, away from the center of the galaxy sort of thing. And they still have to come in, because I could see a future wherein the Jedi Empire gets a little out of control and they consider Anakin a threat. And so they come out and they take him out, and that spurs our heroes to action. And maybe they still come in and they grab Obi-Wan and he goes off. Right. Only it's Mace Windu that kills him this time instead of Vader. I mean, it's, you know,
Vader. See, I think what's great here is that by, you know, Palpatine not surviving, you really do have the opportunity to play with the character of Anakin Skywalker in a very interesting way. And he could be the villain, or he could be more the hero. And either way, I think it's still pretty satisfying. You know, I think, and so it makes me wonder then, because, you know, the whole saga is about redemption, you know, the story of Anakin, the tragedy of the tragedy of Darth Vader, but also his redemption in the end. So if it's not Anakin who we're redeeming, like, who do we redeem in the end? That's where I was wondering, and maybe that's where the idea of Maul came in, of being our redemption point, especially if Anakin becomes the one. And maybe it's a cool thing where, like, in that last climactic thing, it's actually Obi-Wan and you know, Maul again, you know.
That would be,
which might be interesting somehow, cool. You know, like, bring it full circle.
That would be cool. Now, before we wrap it up, one thing I want to ask, and I don't know what the state of the canon stories in the comics or what have you are, but giving some sort of acknowledgement of what we find out in episode 9, is it possible for Palpatine to die in episode 3? Or is he already at the point to go and transfer his soul? Or is that only possible once Anakin has shifted to the dark side, throwing the balance of the Force out of whack?
I haven't finished the part of the Darth Vader comics to know, because I know Darth Vader knows about Exegol. So I get the sense that somewhere in there, but that's in the original trilogy era. So how far back that goes, I don't know, you know. Let's just say it's possible for him to die, because I think, again, that makes it much more interesting question than about what you're going to do with the, you know, you could truly make Anakin have that story where he doesn't go on the dark path, you know, or you could have it where he does, you know, and it makes it a much better story, I think, than having more of that Palpatine influence, maybe. It really does truly become about him trying to do the right thing and destroying everything, which is, you know, instead of it being completely influenced by Palpatine, it just really, he feels like this is the right thing to do. And so I think that really helps, and it would make a great story. And again, if Palpatine's not there, I think it's also interesting for Anakin to be able to go off with Padme. They raise their kids, and their kids are the ones who, you know, end up showing the Jedi a new way of attachment and all these type of things, which help create a Jedi Order which could then be the saviors of the galaxy in the way that they're meant to be, and, you know, take over this, you know, false republic. So, I think all that works better if we're not dealing with the question of Palpatine anymore. So I'm going to say that we just kind of push that to the side.
Yeah, it's fascinating because you look at how rich a story, a universe that Lucas created, that simply changing one element, we still see all of these storylines branching that still go off in support of the general themes and stories that he was trying to communicate to everybody. And I think that is such a testament to just the incredible storytelling backbone of this series, that when you weigh in all of those on-screen things and these characters that we've been given, from Palpatine to Ahsoka, that we can still wind up constructing a story that functions and conveys the same sorts of messages that Lucas was trying to convey. Like, it's just such a testament to the DNA of the series that it's this unbreakable strand that you can manipulate. But if people want to find a way to break your unbreakable strand out there on the internet, where can they find you?
Well, of course, social media is an interesting place, but if you're lurking in those corners, you can find me under the name Matt Rushing02. Just search the social media platform. I'm on a lot of them. You could also find me here on the network. I've completed Outpost with Drea Kaufman, where we talked about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. I'm over on the TFM network. I'm doing a few shows over there. One is called the 602 Club, and we have a blast talking about all of the fandoms we love. John is frequently a guest over there. In fact, we did a short-run show together on the 602 Club feed called Snyder Cuts, and talked through everything that Zack Snyder directed, and we've got some other things in the hopper coming up in the fall, so you'll want to check that out. And then I'm also doing Literary Treks in the Orb over there. Literary Treks about the books and the comics of Star Trek, and then the Orb's about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And John, with all that, I'm out of breath, so please take over and let people know where they can find you.
Well, I want to go dig into a bantha steak, so you can find me as Kessel Junkie on your social network of choice, KESSELJUNKIE. I lurk on Letterboxd. I try to be funny on Twitter, but humor is so subjective, and at times I guess I can be a monster, but it's KESSELJUNKIE. You can, of course, find me, not just here on Aggressive Negotiations, but co-hosting House Lights, a podcast where we go through different series covering different directors. And I co-host that with Tristan Riddell, and we invite co-hosts in all the time to discuss their favorite directors and favorite films. So hopefully we'll catch everybody over there at some point. But, honestly, I'm very concerned about them running out of my bantha steak and blue milk. Strangely, they never run out of green milk. It's weird. So I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.